I'm known throughout the United States, and that's a good thing. I love that, especially in the DMV. And for those of you who may not know what the DMV is, it's for the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. And I'm used to a wide variety and diversity of audiences in this area. And then I went to Marrakesh, Morocco in Africa. We had storytellers from the four corners of our very round globe, all assembled in Marrakesh, along with the local masters as well and their apprentices. What was it like? You're performing for an international audience because there were some tourists. Now I got to point out something. We were the first large festival to take place once they reopened the borders of Morocco. So we, in many senses of the word, the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival was the premier Marrakesh Storytelling International Festival, and it was off the charts. In the old days, we would have said it was all that in a bag of chips, or if you're from the UK, all that in a bag of crisps. But the storytellers were assembled. We had storytellers from the United Kingdom. We had storytellers from countries north of the United Kingdom. And I don't want to assign the wrong country, so I'm not going to call off too many names. But however, we did, because we had some combo Zoom live performances where we had people from Australia, Australasia, India. We had people from just all around the world. We had a storyteller from Canada, and of course we had this storyteller that I kept hearing about from the United States of America. I didn't get a chance to see him perform, but they tell me he was pretty good. But we had storytellers from all over, and the thing is that not only did the international storytellers, the global storytellers, share stories with each other, we also shared stories with the local masters, and they shared stories with us. And sometimes stories were told in Arabic, sometimes they were told in French, sometimes they were told in English, sometimes they were told in American. But the stories were told in many different tongues, and it's a musicality of listening to the stories, and you may not understand the words per se, but you kind of got a feel for what was being said and how it was being said and why it was being said. Oh man, the courtesy, the respect from the assemblage of storytellers. I don't know how you can measure it. It's just to say that even though many of us had never met before at all, we respected each other, and we borrowed from each other a lot. I notice I said borrow, not steal, but you sit down, as a storyteller, you sit down, you hear a good story, you go, oh, I got to add that to my repertoire. And you do. Usually you ask permission if you think it's an original. You'll ask for permission, and usually it's granted. So it was a wonderful experience. We told stories at El Fanar, Jimma El Fanar, also known as the Square. And it's interesting because it's called the Square, but we had a huge circle of storytellers, and we had the local masters, and we also had the British ambassador to Morocco told a story. He was fascinating. We had John Rowe. If James Bond had been a storyteller, then John Rowe would have introduced himself as John Rowe, with license to tell. I mean, it was just so many incredible people there telling stories. I had a chance to go to what they call the English school, because that's where they teach English. So we were going to the English school because upstairs was a place where they prepared food, and we were putting in an order because they did feed us. If nothing else, they did feed us. And so I have a voice that carries. So by the time I got to this top of the second story landing, all the students in the class had turned around and were looking at me, and I said, yes, I'm the loud American. And we chuckled, and I went upstairs. When I came back downstairs, I was trying not to talk, but it was like their spider senses were tingling, and they turned around, they saw me. I said, the loud American will be back. Well, guess what? They requested, wanted to know if I would be willing to tell stories to the English students, the English class. And of course I said yes. Had a great time. And sometimes you get concerned that a joke or a phrase in your story may lose its translation, even when people are listening to you as English as a second language. But by the response, the stories were spot on. The audience was wonderful. We had a great time. I got a loud, thunderous applause. And I asked myself, are they applauding because the stories are great or because I'm leaving? No, it was because the stories were great. It was a great sensation. We went to university. We went to the university there, and we had a workshop where we talked about the different ways of presenting stories and the different ways of describing stories and the different usage of inflection of words in stories. And then we went down to what in America we would call the quad, and we told stories for the students who assembled. And it was Sarah Lloyd Windsor. I hope I got your name right. And of course the irrepressible John Rowe and myself. And we told stories there, and then afterwards we were interviewed by some of the Moroccan news outlets, and that was fascinating. We had stories on stereotypes and how they impacted storytelling and how they impacted the images of people from various backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. We had workshops on women and their impact, and women in business, and women and their influence on not only storytelling but the culture as well. We had story. There was an Irish American night. Now I thought they were doing an Irish American night. I did not know they meant Irish and American night. But I went. It was fascinating. And I came to the conclusion that the only difference, because I partied with some of the Irish, and I came to the conclusion that the only difference, you know the difference between Irish people when they party and African Americans when they party? Nada. Because they both party hard. We live hard, we party hard. The only difference is that if it's an African American party, an elder has to get up and show you how they used to cut a rug, how they used to dance from back in their day. But other than that, the camaraderie, the love, the story, the intensities are parallel. They're parallel. So what was it like to perform in Marrakesh? It was an eye-opening experience that touched the soul and left an imprint on not only the audience but the other global and local tellers. Let me put it this way. I fell in love with Marrakesh, and I think Marrakesh fell in love with me, because guess what? They've invited me back. They've invited me back. This year, it was in February 2022. Next year, it's going to be, I think, February 9th to February, it's 9 days. It's going to be 9 days of celebration. I think it starts on the 9th or the 10th. And it's going to be great. And they've invited me back. So I'm excited. The experience of telling stories in Marrakesh, the premier Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival was like the launching of a space capsule for the first time. Everybody wants it to be successful. And upon this successful landing, everyone is not only happy, but they want to do it again. And that was what it was like to tell stories in Marrakesh, Morocco. From Anacostia to Africa, my name is Baba C.